Hello there, welcome back and welcome to part 43 in my build log of the Trumpeter 1:200 scale model of the Titanic. Today I am sort of carrying on where I left off in the last episode, so I'm going to be wiring up and plugging in those lights that I added to the aft bridge. I'm also going to be adding a few more lights to the poop deck and to the aft well deck. There's a few other bulbs I want to add in there, so by the end of the video all of the lighting on the aft section of the ship will be complete. And I'm doing a few other ad hoc jobs as well. I had the bath full because of my submarine video, so I took the opportunity to float test the model again. And I've added the forward expansion joint on the boat deck, and I've also added a few other pillars and stuff to the model. So I'll be covering all of that today. So without any further ado, we'll crack on. So I've just removed the crane base because I need to get an LED inside for the light that was there. And what I'm using here is a 1mm drill bit. So these are tiddly little things. In fact, if I'm honest, I tend to only use 1mm drill bits for circuit boards because through-hole components tend to require a 1mm drill bit for their hole. But it's a nice size, it doesn't look oversized. In scale terms, obviously, it equates to 200mm or 20 centimeters, which seems like a logical size for a light box. It's probably not exact, but I think for my purposes, it is close enough. And of course, what we really need is something that is large enough that it lets the majority of the light from this out, but nothing too big that it looks a bit silly. And this is the same size hole that I did on this section of the aft well deck, and those LEDs turned out very nice. So I'm fairly confident that this will be fairly good. The next process is just simply to glue this against the back of the hole I've cut in the crane base. Nice and easy. So I'm just going to use my sharp knife to clear up some of the swarf from the drill. Sadly, it seems inevitable with polystyrene that you get a fair quantity of swarf, almost irrespective of how sharp your drill is or anything, to be honest. It just seems to happen. But you know, there are worse problems in life than stuff blowing out the back of a hole you've just drilled. So of course this is not a particularly easy job to do so the camera can see, but there we are. If I didn't want to work to camera, starting a YouTube channel probably wasn't the right idea. Nope, I'm going to mess that up. Ooh, that's a good idea. What I might do instead is put the glue on the LED itself. So that's the LED in place now, and I'm just going to add a bit more glue to bolster that up, and then I'll get the crane base reinstalled on the deck. Now, as I've said a few times, my wiring circuits for LEDs tend to go in 4s, and this is no exception. I need 4 LEDs, so I've got one there, so I need 2 more. You might have spotted him already. There is one. So these are going to go underneath the overhang of the poop deck. You can just see that wire poking out there. So this is going to go and get stuck up in the ceiling and just illuminate that area that otherwise would be pretty sort of gloomy. And there's going to be another one on that side as well. So what I'm doing here, as I've done on a few videos in the past, I'm just joining wires together with the soldering iron. I'll go through in just a second how they're actually arranged, but this is just a case of getting the old insulation off first and then getting a nice clean solder joint on there. And once I've tested everything, I'll glue them all down properly. So, if you're following what's going on, I've now commoned the 2 positive branches. So we've got one branch that goes through here and across the aft bridge and comes out to this neutral line here. And we've got this other branch which has the 4 LEDs 2 in the crane bases and 2 going out onto the underside of the poop deck. So they're now common together and they're both protected by a resistor. So the next job is to connect them back into the supply over here for the entire area. So what I need to do is connect these wires to one and connect the end of the middle section of those 2 resistors to this red line. And that's us. That's us done. And it's a case of doing a wee bit of testing, praying that it works, which, as I say, is never a guarantee. And then going from there. So what I'll do is I'll get these lines hooked up and I'll give it a quick test to see if it actually works, and as long as it does that, we can get these things tied down out the way and on to the next job. Right, plugged back in. Let's give it a go. It's the first time I've actually tried it, so let's see. So, turn on the transmitter, turn on the ship. It works, I think. Let's see. Well, the first section definitely works. We've got light coming out of the 2 crane areas, and we do certainly have light coming from underneath the poop deck as well. The aft section. Oh yeah, it does work as well, actually. Cracking. Very good. Okay. Well, that's very good news. It's unusual that these things work first time, which is why I'm a wee bit surprised. But no, that's very welcome news. Okay, excellent. So I'm just drilling out these holes at the back of A deck for the support pillars that go up for the boat deck. And the reason I'm drilling these holes out is because I want these to be a bit more sort of stable and structurally sound, because these pillars really don't have very much surface area of adhesion. You know, they've only got their very bottom part that's glued on, and of course I can't glue them to the boat deck as well because the boat deck needs to be removable. So I'm trying to sort of drill out these holes so they at least penetrate through the deck and have a little bit more rigidity to them when they're stuck in place. Lovely, so that's all of them drilled out. And get the pillars in and get the job done. So here we are in the aft section. Looks rather nice, I think. It doesn't look too bright. There's lots of shadow and stuff, which is kind of what we're after. But we've still got a good amount of light down in the well deck as well. So I'm very happy with that. Moving up, you can see the pillars supporting the aft section of the boat deck are in place, and they look very nice. They just sort of make the scene look a bit more reasonable now that we're sort of justifying the overhang of this deck with those pillars being there now, so that adds to it nicely, I think. So, all in all, she is coming together. So here you are, you can see we've installed the forward expansion joint on the boat deck. I've only done the forward, not done the afters yet. That is in the works, needing to be done still. And you can see there's a slight issue here that this runs just a little bit too far aft, I think. Judging by the location on the actual model itself, and I'm not sure if you can see, but also the location within a deck, it looks to me like this is just slightly out. Probably about 2 or 3 millimeters too far aft. Now, I suspect this is probably me rather than Scaledecks, but this was sort of like a forced decision, really, because there was I couldn't move it any further back because there wasn't enough material to sort of cover it. But what I might be able to do, and I'm going to have to do a bit of investigation first, because I also need to be aware that the expansion joint comes across here as well, so I need to do a bit of investigation on what sort of gubbins is around here, which might also cause an issue. But what I'm thinking about I might do is just shift it about 2 or 3 millimeters forwards, and then do a sort of patch repair on the deck in the same way that I did down in the forecastle deck, you see down there, and it takes a bit of a trained eye to notice it. So that may well be a way around it. In terms of weathering, I've done the same as I did previously, and I've just sort of rubbed a bit of sort of black wash on there to make it look like it's had quite a lot of footfall come across it. Remember, this is the top deck, so any wind and rain will be falling straight onto here. Same with any things like bird poo and stuff. So this would have had a fair amount of weathering even by the ship's maiden voyage. So it's worth bearing that in mind, and I'm sort of tried to make that as obvious as possible. Now you'll see on the other side that we've got a slight discrepancy with the black sort of guttering here on the second section of Scaledecks versus the first over here. Now that is not an issue because the KA set comes with guttering pieces, so these will be covered over quite happily anyway once I fit those. So we don't need to worry about that. That was just a slight misalignment that came about in the KA set. Sorry, in the Scaledecks set. But to be honest, that sort of thing is almost impossible to avoid when you're printing and laser cutting, so not a concern in the slightest. So that is the forward expansion joint. So I had the bath full because I was filming that video of my model sub, so I thought I'd just do another stability test. As you can see, she's sitting pretty nicely in the water. She's not perfect. I've not got the aft stuff on yet because I put them somewhere and I can't quite find them, but most stuff is on her, and what this really shows is that the vast majority of the weight of the model is in now, and she's sitting pretty stably in the water, waterline wise. We could still do with going down a bit at the back. At the front we're probably just about alright. It's tricky in the bath to work out how she's sitting actually, because you can't quite zoom out far enough to work out whether she's down at the head or down at the aft or whatever, you know, so it's quite tricky to work that out. But she's still sitting very happily in the water. She's relatively stable. She, when you actually move forward and aft, everything works pretty nicely. So at the moment, it doesn't really seem like there's much to worry about. I'm also hopeful that there's probably some more techniques that I can remove weight anyway. For example, this piece of plastic is going to go. I can remove some of the plastic under here. you know, there's quite a lot of bits and bobs that I can cut stuff out of, which will provide further savings in weight anyway. So for now, it's always nice just to get it back in the water, just to check that we are still on track. But for now, we seem to be doing all right still. Now, long-time viewers of the channel may well know that when I first assembled the entire superstructure, there were a number of issues with it. And these were really just sort of like the decks tessellating together properly. And you can see that still now, there is still a bit of an issue. If I zoom in here, you can actually see that there's about 1 millimeter off on the boat deck. And when I just press down lightly, it's perfect. It sits in the right place. It looks lovely. But then when I release my finger, it sits proud. And this is a problem, but I've spent a few weeks working on this, and previous to my doing any work, the problem was much more like that. We were sort of 2 or 3 millimeters out. And what I wanted to sort of show you is how these things kind of magnify. So if I take off the boat deck, I'll pop that over there, you'll see a deck underneath. And it doesn't really look like there's any issues with a deck. But the reality is, there actually were. And it's one of those things that it's very hard to tell until you get the final deck on, because at this point, unless you really know the Titanic, it's difficult to know whether that deck is at the right level in relation to those windows or not. But it's very easy to tell if the boat deck's wrong, if the deck sits up above the side of the walls. So if we take a deck off as well, and just unplug the lighting circuit, you'll see some of the corrections that I've had to make. So there were a few little issues, and they were tiny, minor little issues, but nonetheless, over the next 2 decks up, they magnified and manifested in a sort of 3 millimeter error. So you can see here, for example, you can see that most of the plastic is white, and that's because that's the plastic as it was since I painted it. But you see that there's some areas which are grey, and this is where I've had to cut high spots down, and I've had to sort of plane the plastic off a bit. Same over here, grey section there, and all along here up to here. So this was all high, and what it was doing is it was pushing the next deck up, which in turn pushed the next deck up. So I've trimmed those all down, and same a little bit with this area, sort of the frosted window here. A lot of that had to be trimmed, and again over here you can see evidence of it again. Grey section there, which just indicates that this area was slightly high as well. And of course, that isn't the only problem. Because I'm using Scaledecks, and all the deck housing sits on top of Scaledecks, that then automatically raises it a few millimeters, well, not a few millimeters, but sort of probably about maybe 0.5 millimeter higher than it should be. And because I've got 3 decks worth, that's 1.5 millimeters worth of raising. So if I now put the decks back on, you'll see that with my sort of iterative corrections, so with my planing down of various bits of plastic and stuff like that, we have been able to largely rectify the problem. It still exists to a minor degree, but I need to do a bit more work on it to resolve this further. I'm certainly not going to leave it like this, because I just think it sort of shatters the realism of the model, particularly somewhat. But as you can see now, with all those decks in place, we're not far off. And when I apply the sort of the pressure that will come from having a bolt in there, we're really not far off at all. We're only about 0.5 mil, so we're getting there. But as I say, this is an iterative process, and I've had to try multiple different fixes. As I say, I've had to try the sort of the planing down of the plastic, but also on the boat deck, I've used a different piece. I made my own boat deck piece, and that has saved me a good few millimeters. But as you see, multiple different techniques will eventually solve the problem. And so there we are, plenty of stuff complete and plenty of stuff still to do. As you can see, this becomes a bit more apparent with the lights on. that's the ideal scenario there, but we'll get there in due course. But there's a few other issues that I need to have a look into as well. You'll notice over here, light is just getting through the top there. You see, the paint isn't quite thick enough. And indeed, actually, a lot of this is slightly glowing. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to paint the interior of this black. Something I probably should have foreseen, but oh well. You can see there's a bit of light bleed here as well. Less worried about this because there's stuff to go on top of this aft bridge. So I'm fairly confident that won't be an issue later on. But anyway, quite a lot of progress in this video. This now does mean that the only lighting left to do is on the boat deck. All of the forward lighting is done, all of the hull, all of A deck and B deck, and all of the aft as well. So the only lighting now is the very, very top. So that's it for this episode. If you've got any questions or comments, pop them down below and I'll do my best to get back to you. If you've enjoyed it, please do like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye for now.